Good morning, everyone. So this is the second part of labor, and we're going to look at this concept called MRP and MPP. Where's slideshow here now? Current slide. Okay, so when we look at this, we really have to ask ourselves one question. Why do we pay people? What do we pay them? What determines the wage rate that is paid in a lot of industries? And in economics, it kind of comes down to these two things. One is called the marginal physical product. Okay. So there's a bit of a definition here that you need to know, but we're going to make it this a little bit easier. We're just going to look at a question. We're going to draw a table and draw a little graph. Okay. So marginal physical product. What is it? Well, let's have a look at this. In essence, it's the extra output that you get when an additional unit of labor is employed. So looking at this graph here, marginal is always the extra if one more additional unit is created. So you're hiring one person, total output is 20. You hire two people, it jumps to 45. You hire three people, it jumps to 75, and so on. But really what you want to see here on the right is the additional unit of output that each extra employee makes. Okay, we've seen this before when we've looked at marginal costs. Every additional unit of output, so every new person that you hire, how much do they make? That's the marginal physical product. Okay, so that's all this definition means. You might see a little table like this, and it might ask you to, calculate the marginal physical product for the fourth unit of labor. But it's pretty straightforward. As I said, we'll look at it. We'll look at an example of this in a couple of minutes. All right. Why does the MPP change? So again, the MPP changes. So why do people get better at making stuff? Why do people get worse at making stuff? The additional employee you bring in, why do they make more? Why do they buy less? Again, it depends on many things. These are all the factors. The nature of the factors, the specialized nature, the training of the staff or lack of training of the staff, the expertise of the entrepreneur. So again, do they delegate responsibility? Do they show them how to do it? Or do they just bring more staff in just to load up the office with extra staff in the hope that it will increase revenue? And then this concept called the law of diminishing marginal returns. Okay. There's a second one then, because it's not just about how much they produce. I mean, you hire anyone in Supermax or McDonald's or anything. It's not about how many burgers they can produce. It's how much revenue they will bring in if they produce extra burgers or an extra level of output. So really what we're looking at here is and this is a question that all entrepreneurs will have, is if I hire another member of staff, will they bring in more money for me? Okay, that's the question. And then we're going to look at how much we should pay that person. So you can see here, very simple example here. As our workers increase, our total revenue increases. So if you just look at the first two columns of this, or the first two columns of this table, you will see that, oh yeah, we hire more people, our revenue increases. But it's only if you look right and saying, what is the marginal revenue that each additional worker brings in? And what you can see pretty straightforward is our first worker is bringing in 200. There's no marginal revenue there at all. Second worker, 80. Third worker, 100. Fourth worker, it starts dropping. It starts dropping. Anyone want to answer me why? Because of this thing called the law of diminishing marginal returns, which we've talked about ad nauseum in costs. So again, think about this. You hire more people, specialization, you hire additional people, things start going pear-shaped because the law of diminishing marginal returns start kicking in. And as you can see, as you hire more and more people, you're actually getting way worse of a return. Though your revenue is increasing, every additional worker is actually bringing you in less and less stuff. So we can graph it as such. And when we use, there's a little definition there. When we graph it, it looks like this. And we're going to graph this in a second. So you can see here, as we hire more workers, initially we get more productivity per worker. This is all per worker. But once we hit a particular point, the law of diminishing marginal returns kicks in, and we can hire less and less, or we earn less and less per individual worker. Okay. So that is that. Why does it slope downwards from left to right? Again, two reasons. One, the law of diminishing marginal returns. Too many cooks in the kitchen. I think we've spoken about that before. You can't just keep hiring people in because the law of diminishing marginal returns kicks in. And then a law of demand. So the normal law of demand. If you want to sell more, a large amount, you're going to have to reduce the price of its product. So again, you look at big companies, they will always lower the price of its product and the price of their product to sell more, which means then if you're lowering the price of your product, you're not going to hire more people, because if you have to pay them a high salary, they're actually not going to bring in any profits to it whatsoever. Okay. Exceptions. There are exceptions to this law. And again, this law is looking at the very bottom. Is why would you hire someone if they're not bringing in a lot of money? Why would you hire someone if they're not covering their costs? And we said this from day one when we looked at costs. Your number one job as an entrepreneur should be cover your costs, and your main cost is a wage. If you cannot cover a cost, if your employee cannot cover their own wage, why would you hire them? And this is the main exception. The main exception is this thing called labor hoarding. And what's hoarding about? This is when you hire people to just so you can maintain a particular level of staffing, or because there's not that many skilled people in the industry or in the community that you live in, so you want to retain their services. And in fact, you'll retain their services even if you're losing money on them. So it's called labor hoarding. So you can see it there. They're saying they're not washing their own back at the moment, but in the future, if the economy picks up, I want to keep the staff that I have here just in case something happens. So it's called labor hoarding. Plus, existing workers are easier to retrain, and inexperienced new staff, whenever they may be required, trying to retrain people, it can be a pain. And then there's the last one. What factors influence M or P? So what factors influence your marginal revenue, productivity? They're all there. Productivity of the factory, again, we've talked about this, the selling price and the law of demand. Okay, and I think that is it. Oh, is it easy to calculate? Yeah, we're going to do that here in a second. So that's it. I accept. Let's look at a question. So I've kind of belted through that very, very quick. I need to stop this now and let us look at a question. So I would like you to take this down. So I'd like you to pause this video right now, and I'd like you to take this table down. Pause. Cool. And when you pause it, actually do it. Finish it out. So finish it out. So what I want you to do is I want you to fill in all the extra boxes. Yeah? Pause and do it. Okay, we're back. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at this area here, first of all, marginal physical product. Okay, so the marginal physical product, which means it's the amount of stuff that I have made, okay, that one extra worker has brought in. So the first one here, one worker, we never start off with that. The second worker, how much have they brought in? How much have they increased output by? And we can see here the difference between 6 and 14 is 8. Okay, the difference here is 10. The difference here is 8. The difference here is 3. The difference here is 1. So what are we looking at here? We're saying that each additional employee that we hire is bringing in, well, in this case, 8, in this case, 10, 8, 3, and 1. So really, to be honest with you, the law of diminishing marginal returns is kind of kicking in around here, 4, 5, and 6. So the question is, should we employ 3 people? Should we employ 4 people? Should we employ 5 people? Well, let's keep going. Now let's look at this thing called marginal revenue productivity. So again, we have a little definition down here, or we have a little calculation how to work it out down here. Marginal revenue productivity is price multiplied by MPP. So price multiplied by MPP. I've got that correct. Yeah. So here, 20 multiplied by 8 gives us 160. So this tells us that the next worker number 2, has brought in 8 additional units at 20 euros a pop, is 160 euros. Worker number 3 has brought in an additional 10 units at 20 euros a pop. So the worker number 3 has actually brought in 200 euros worth of revenue, extra revenue. Okay. Worker number 4 has brought in additional 8 units at 20 euros, 160 euros. And then worker number 5 has brought in an additional 3 units at 20 euros each, 60 euros. And then worker number 6 has only brought in an additional 1 unit at 20 euros a pop, gives us 20 euros. So there's our little table, okay, that I need you to kind of fill out just to make sense. So have a look at the table, see if it makes sense, okay? Again, we're looking to see what additional revenue each additional unit of labor is providing. And then we need to look at our graph and say, what should we pay them and where should we stop? So what we're going to do is we're going to graph that. In particular, what we're going to do is we're going to graph this one here, this M or P curve. All right, so let's go over here and let's graph it as best we can. So over here, and let's do this in red for the fun of it. So what I've done here, and I'd like you to pause this again, X and Y axis, your wage. slash output is here on the left, and down here, I should have said, excuse me, this is our number of labors. So 5 is the amount of labors down here. Okay, so let's graph it and let's see what happens. So we're graphing the M or P. So at one labor, so at 1 unit of labor, our M or P is at 120, which is about there. At 2 units of labor, have a look at your table. We have 160, which is up about here-ish, isn't it? Yeah. Actually, it's a little bit lower than that, but anyway, 160 is about there. At 3, if we hire a third member, they're actually bringing us 200 units or 200 in additional revenue. And fourth brings in 160, which is about here. 5 brings in 60, so serious nosedive here. And then 6 brings in 20, so really poor. Okay, so what we're going to do, obviously enough, is we're going to join those dots together. Join those dots together. And we get our M or P curve. So this right here is our M or P curve, our marginal revenue curve. This is our M or P curve. This is also actually our demand curve for labor. So let's look at it now, our demand curve for labor. And what is this telling us? This is telling us how many people we should hire based upon the amount of revenue that they bring in. Now, the last thing we haven't looked at is this thing here. Look at this. This is our wage. This is our wage. Now, depending on the country we live in, depending on the industry wage, the minimum wage, whatever the case may be. Let's say this is a skilled industry, and the skilled industry wage rate is at 60 euros an hour. And it's 60 euros an hour, which is fair enough for a skilled, in a skilled industry, 60 euros an hour would be fair enough. At 60 euros an hour, what is the situation here? How many people should we hire? Well, here's 60 right here. If we go straight across, we'll figure out that where we should be is at 5 units of labor. So at 5 units of labor, we should be here. So when we work all of this out, if the current wage rate, the current industry wage rate is at 60 euros an hour, the most we should hire is 5 people. Should we hire a 6th person? Not really, to be honest with you, because if we hire a 6th person, remember what a 6th person will bring? They'll only bring an additional 20 euros of revenue, which isn't covering the cost of this whatsoever. So the marginal cost, remember the marginal cost, I'm going to write it up here. The marginal cost of each additional unit of labor is 60 euros. The marginal cost. If your marginal revenue or your M or P is equal to 60 euros at this point, that's where we stop. So we always stop, like we did with cost curves. We always stop where MC is equal to MR. We always stop where every additional unit of revenue is equal to additional unit of costs. So we're never going to hire anyone else, because if we hire someone else, we're going to lose money with every additional unit. And that is the M or P curve. We've seen it before. It's just a normal cost curve, but this is specific to labor, specific to hiring members of staff. Okay. And just the last thing on this point right here is where we're going to pay everyone. So everyone here, the marginal revenue is actually is constant. So it's constant at 60. But even if it wasn't, we're always going to pay people generally the same kind of pay rate, because you won't pay like the first person who brings in 120 euros and the second person who brings in 160 euros and the third person who brings in 200 euros of revenue. You're never going to pay them any extra, because again, we're talking about a big company here. You're going to have a flat rate of pay, so you're going to pay people the same thing, and what you're going to pay them, depending on the situation, in this particular situation, is 60 euros. Okay. And that's it. There's not too much in it. I hope it's not too tricky, because we've kind of looked at cost curves, as I said, a lot already. So in an exam, what could you ask to do? You could be given the table, asked to draw the labor demand curve. You could be given the labor demand curve and asked where, at what point would you stop hiring extra members of staff, and you would just be asked to explain your answer. Okay. Ask. Send me an email. Put a comment on the underneath the video or whatever the case may be. Other than that, that's it. Shine. Bye bye.